drink. I like when people die.
All we know is shoot first and ask questions last.
All we know is tomorrow when we cluster mad.
It's the Jeffery Manor, man. 95th to 97, man. We out here, man. It's that chain gang shit.
Don't cheat, man. LAFA. Show them your wrist. Show them about 5 bands. The Gucci out, nigga. Don't cheat. Carry your. Tell them we out here. Don't cheat. On that LAFA. Dave, show them niggas what we on. Cheat. LAFA. Cheat. White folks. Cheat. What you want, fool? On that LAFA shit, what's that? That's that kush?
Jeffery Manor, now that's a whole little neighborhood on 4 You got the GDs on one side, you got the LAFAs on the other side on 4 It's all type of stuff that be going on in the Manor too, bro.
For more than 2 decades, the adjoining Southside Chicago neighborhoods of Jeffery Manor and South Deering have remained trapped in the relentless crossfire of a brutal gang war between 2 former allies, the notorious street crews known as Gang and LAFA. What originated from a fractured friendship has degenerated into a never-ending cycle of violence and retaliation, fueling the bitter rivalry. Shootings, assaults, and deaths plague blocks fought over by 2 gangs, once loyal comrades, now sworn enemies. This brutal conflict terrorizing Chicago's South Side originated from a senseless murder over 26 years ago. On the cold morning of November 23, 1997, 15-year-old Anna Vera was gunned down in broad daylight outside of Kelly High School, the hail of bullets cutting short her young life. For over 9,500 days and counting since Vera's murder, the flames of violence have raged on between young men wielding guns like judges while elderly residents barricade themselves inside, praying tonight won't be their last. An entire generation in South Deering has grown up knowing nothing except fear while their youth are coerced into choosing sides in a conflict that started years before they were born. This is the story of the origins of one of Chicago's deadliest gang wars. Its current combatants are often unaware of exactly what or who they are fighting for, only that the killing must continue. The roots of the LAFA gang trace back to the gangster disciples set known as JMG, Jeffery Manor Gangsters, active in Chicago's Jeffery Manor neighborhood since the 1980s. Despite its rich history, Jeffery Manor and South Deering faced challenges, including periods of elevated violent crime. The insane King Cobras and Spanish Vice Lords, founded in 1979 and 1980 respectively, left their mark on this neighborhood. Over the years, there has been a decline in violent crime since the early 1990s, although petty crime remains a concern. Though still identifying as gangster disciples, this new clique coalesced socially into an exceptionally tight-knit unit. They began separating themselves from traditional JMG activities, bonding closely like family. This perceived exclusivity alarmed JMG's established leadership and quickly sparked tensions, as the subset crew further isolated itself and acted outside GD norms. Hostilities with JMG higher-ups reached a boiling point. Violent outbreaks soon emerged between leadership elements of the core gangster disciples and this young breakaway faction. These internal clashes marked the definitive split of the subset crew from mainline JMG and their parent gangster disciples nation. They would soon emerge publicly under a new name, the Love Anna Forever Always Gang, or LAFA, no longer tied to the disciples. The pivotal moment that fueled the irreparable split between the 2 factions occurred with the tragic death of a 15-year-old girl named Anna Vera, who was gunned down in front of Kelly High School on the southwest side of Chicago in a gang-related shooting, one day after she and her killer had a confrontation, police said. Vera, a former student at Kelly High School, was walking with 2 of her friends at about 4:45 p.m. on November 23, 1997, when she was shot in the back. She died of the gunshot wound soon after. Police said that the day before, on November 22nd, Vera and the gunman had some kind of confrontation. The next day, the man targeted and shot her outside the high school. Witnesses reported hearing the gunman tell Vera right before shooting her, "Come to my town and get gunned down." The suspect was said to be a gang member. No arrests were made. Vera's senseless murder sparked the genesis of a violent gang war between her old associates in the Jeffery Manor Gangsters and former allies who broke off to form the gang Love Anna Forever Always LAFA, named to memorialize the slain 15-year-old. Her death ignited a feud that would span decades and claim dozens more lives in tit-for-tat gang violence that continues to this day. In 2009, the feud between the 2 factions was rekindled when a LAFA member, 19-year-old Brian Puckett, was found shot in the Jeffery Manor neighborhood. The Tribune reported his death, marking a renewed wave of violence. Brian Puckett's demise marked a somber chapter in the ongoing conflict, prompting a temporary semblance of peace, a delicate truce that sought to mitigate the rising tensions. The fragile peace that followed Brian Puckett's death proved short-lived as the relentless cycle of violence, retaliation, and tragedy resumed, plunging the community back into the harrowing crossfire of an unyielding and brutal gang war. The year 2012 marked a particularly horrifying chapter in this ongoing saga, when a dreadful incident unfolded in Merrill Park. The devastating incident claimed the lives of Janine Hancock, a mother of 3, and 17-year-old Alexi Johnson, while 2 others suffered injuries in the relentless gunfire. Merrill Park, once a place of recreation and community, earned a chilling moniker, Murder Park. This ominous nickname starkly reflected the grim reality of the persistent and bloody gang conflicts that continued to haunt the area. The events of 2012 underscored the deep-seated tensions and the profound impact of the gang war on innocent lives. The community found itself grappling with the aftermath of senseless violence, mourning the loss of individuals who had become casualties in a war, not of their making. As Merrill Park became synonymous with tragedy, the next year, another tragic incident unfolded as 19-year-old Antonio Calhoun, a member of LAFA, lost his life in a drive-by shooting. The incident occurred around 10:53 p.m. on September 11th in the 10200 block of South Oglesby Avenue. During the fateful event, Antonio and a 20-year-old companion were standing on a sidewalk when a vehicle approached, and an unidentified assailant inside began firing. Antonio succumbed to the gunfire and was pronounced dead at the scene. The older companion sustained a gunshot wound to the leg, but was reported to be in good condition after the shooting. The cycle of retaliatory violence resumed on June 1st, 2014, casting a dark shadow over the Jeffery Manor neighborhood on the south side. At approximately 8:50 p.m., Denaro Appleton, a 31-year-old member of JMG, fell victim to a targeted shooting in the 9600 block of South Brennan Avenue. The assailants, in a grim echo of past incidents, unleashed a barrage of gunfire upon Denaro Appleton. Despite efforts to save him, he succumbed to his injuries and was pronounced dead at Advocate Christ Medical Center in Oak Lawn, as confirmed by the police. Adding a potential layer of tragedy to this incident, there have been unverified reports suggesting that Denaro Appleton might have been the brother of Anna Vera, the 15-year-old whose death in 1997 had ignited the long-standing feud between JMG and the breakaway gang that later became LAFA.
LAFA would be named after Anna, and it stands for Love Anna Forever Always. Allegedly, her brother would branch off and go with MP instead of LAFA. Her brother would allegedly be killed by LAFA in 2014.
Before the deadly gang war between LAFA and JMG could continue and claim more lives, LAFA was indicted on criminal charges in 2015, dealing a blow to their operations. Reports said that 6 people, including 2 alleged Chicago gang members, were charged in connection with heroin sales in Duluth, Minnesota at that time. 2 additional alleged LAFA gang members were expected to face charges soon as well. LAFA had been actively selling drugs in Duluth since 2012, viewing smaller cities like Duluth as more profitable drug markets compared to Chicago due to less competition and higher demand.
1.16 pounds of heroin fentanyl, 1,200 grams of methamphetamine, and we had 2 firearms with ammunition that were seized.
Operation West Side Mows began last December.
Akeem Assad, an alleged high-ranking LAFA member, conducted multiple undercover heroin and meth sales over months along with associates. He directed buyers to other LAFA members when resupplying. In total, over 250 grams of hard drugs and 4 firearms were seized from the LAFA crew during the 2015 investigation. 2 other alleged members faced charges, but were jailed elsewhere. Police urged Duluth residents to report any suspicious activity after some had noticed concerning behavior from LAFA dealers, but hadn't contacted law enforcement. Duluth Lieutenant Jeff Cazell said at the time that this group has been responsible for a large portion of heroin we've seen increase in this area in the past 3 years. The LAFA gang members conduct many of the same criminal activity as typical Chicago street gangs, to include trafficking of firearms and narcotics. But what separates this LAFA gang is their propensity of violence. Many LAFA gang members rely on robbing and extorting other drug dealers for narcotics and money. The bloody war between LAFA and their rivals reignited in 2017, when violence again claimed lives after a brief lull. On the morning of February 4th, 2017, 15-year-old Clavon Eubanks, associated with the JMG set, was gunned down in Chicago's Jeffery Manor neighborhood. Eubanks was walking through Merrill Park in the 2100 block of East 97th Street when he heard gunshots erupt and felt a sudden pain in his chest, according to police reports. He fled to a nearby home but had suffered a gunshot wound to the upper right chest. Rushed by emergency crews to Christ Medical Center, Eubanks ultimately perished from his injuries. His murder marked another violent flare-up, showing the LAFA versus JMG beef persisting despite brief quiet periods. With Eubanks the latest casualty caught in the crosshairs, the decades-long gang war raged on unabated into 2017 after claiming yet another young life. Merely a month later, in March 2017, another eruption of violence related to the feud claimed 2 more lives. 23-year-old Dominique Victoria Scott and 27-year-old Cornell M. Patrick, a known LAFA member, were traveling in a silver van near 71st Street and South Shore Drive when a black Jeep pulled alongside them. Gunmen inside the Jeep suddenly opened fire. Patrick suffered a gunshot wound to the side of his body in the barrage of bullets, while Scott was tragically struck in the head. Their van accelerated uncontrollably and crashed into a pole just north of nearby metro tracks after the shooting. Both were pronounced dead at the scene. A third passenger escaped unharmed, but police believe the victims were intentionally targeted. The brutal March shooting highlighted the climate of fear and danger still simmering as retaliatory warfare dragged on between gang factions in Southside neighborhoods. With LAFA member Patrick and innocent victim Scott added to the body count, tensions showed no signs of abating. The bloodshed continued only 2 months later when more young lives were cut short. On May 9, 2017, 17-year-old Cavion Walton, aka 1010, a JMG member, was walking on 95th Street when two masked gunmen leaped from a black SUV. The assassins opened fire, fatally striking Walton multiple times in the chest, right leg, and arm before speeding off. Walton was rushed to Advocate Christ Medical Center but perished from his wounds, and another teenager died at just 17 over neighborhood rivalries dating back decades. His 22-year-old companion also suffered grave multiple gunshot injuries during the senseless broad daylight attack. JMG would be renamed 10 Gang in honor of Walton. In September of the same year, Darius Buckley, a 33-year-old member of JMG, or 10 Gang, tragically lost his life in the ongoing conflict. The incident occurred during a dispute in a driveway in Jeffery Manor. According to the Cook County Medical Examiner's Office, Delton Bates, identified as the other party involved, reportedly brandished a firearm and fired multiple shots at Buckley's head. Despite prompt response from authorities, Buckley was declared dead at the scene. Bates was apprehended approximately 10 minutes after the shooting in the same driveway. The tables turned for the LAFA set as their losses began to outweigh their victories. On January 27, 2018, a tragic incident unfolded shortly before 11:15 a.m. in the 1300 block of West 110th Place in the Morgan Park neighborhood on the far south side. Jamin Harris, a 20-year-old member of LAFA, fell victim to a fatal attack, sustaining a chest wound, and another man was shot in the leg while standing on the sidewalk. According to the police, the shots were fired from a white sedan. Harris was declared dead at 11:55 a.m., and the other victim was rushed to Advocate Christ Medical Center, where he was listed in critical condition. Then, in 2019, another significant blow struck LAFA as 11 individuals, including a woman and 2 of her sons, faced criminal charges in a federal investigation involving drugs and guns in Chicago. Over the course of the multi-year investigation, law enforcement confiscated 29 firearms with associated ammunition, around 1 kilogram of cocaine, 78 pounds of marijuana, over $190,000 in suspected illicit cash, and high-value items such as diamond jewelry, Rolex watches, and designer clothing valued at over $300,000. Much of the alleged drug trafficking activities were concentrated on the south side of Chicago. According to federal court charges, 26-year-old Rakeem Assad of Chicago and his mother, 46-year-old Harriet McPherson, collaborated with 46-year-old Derek McNeil, also of Chicago, in a conspiracy to possess cocaine and marijuana with the intent to distribute. Assad faces an additional charge of knowingly possessing a loaded handgun in connection with a drug trafficking crime. During the course of the investigation, law enforcement seized a Rolex watch and 2 necklaces from Assad, with 14-karat gold pendants bearing the initials LAFA in diamonds, an apparent nod to Assad's suspected affiliation with LAFA. In 2020, tragedy struck again when 15-year-old Terrence Malden, also known as Munchie from the LAFA set, lost his life, echoing a haunting parallel to the loss of Anna Vera 23 years earlier at the same age. Munchie fell victim to a fatal shooting with the assailant firing from a white Audi, striking him in the back. Despite being wounded, Munchie managed to flee through a gangway, eventually collapsing in an alley. In his final moments, he reached out to his mother, calling her as he lay dying. The tide turned again as 10 Gang began suffering losses in the late 2010s and early 2020 SE from LAFA acts of vengeance. On May 25, 2021, prominent 10 Gang member Trey became the latest victim while with his young child. 33rd was driving with his 7-year-old son in the car on 95th Street near Stony Island Avenue when assassins in another vehicle abruptly pulled up. The gunman opened fire, striking 33rd in the chin, though narrowly missing the child. Despite his injuries, Trey remarkably managed to transport himself to seek medical attention at Advocate Trinity Hospital, but the brazen mid-afternoon assassination attempt showed LAFA forces remained determined to retaliate against their foes even decades later. traitor, with no regard for innocent life in the crossfire. Trey found himself embroiled in street warfare yet again merely months after the 2021 assassination attempt. While filming a music video in November 2022, gunshots suddenly erupted, leaving the production interrupted by real violence. Video from the set shows Trey and others scrambling for cover, with multiple people appearing injured in the chaos. Miraculously, the burgeoning rap artist escaped unharmed, unlike during his earlier chin shooting. Then on August 23, 2020, LAFA associate Demetrius E. Ivory was killed in a deadly ambush while driving in his car. 31-year-old Ivory was on South Halsted Street when assassins in another vehicle abruptly pulled up and sprayed his car with gunshots. Struck multiple times, he perished soon after at Christ Medical Center. A 29-year-old man and 38-year-old woman, also wounded in the drive-by, ultimately survived. The bloody back and forth between LAFA and 10 Gang persisted into recent months, with 24-year-old Princeton Mac the latest casualty. On July 19, 2023, Mac was gunned down near 98th and Marion, right in the heart of the war-zoned Southside neighborhoods both sides stake claim over. Struck by multiple gunshots shortly after 7 p.m., Mac was rushed to the University of Chicago Medical Center but perished from his injuries. His murder came just months after the prominent 10 Gang member was involved in a separate caught-on-camera shootout, surviving that close brush with death. But Mac's luck ultimately ran out, showing the entrenched gang war knows no timeline even with most original members faded from view.
That bitch looking freaky, boy. Y'all supposed to...
As the years passed, the fiery gang war continued simmering, with tensions erupting into more tit-for-tat bloodshed. Both the 10 Gang and LAFA factions suffered losses of members shot down in the streets that defined their territories. Brief stretches of quiet could swiftly be shattered by retaliatory shootings like the 2012 Merrill Park Massacre and 2015 federal indictments disrupting LAFA operations. The violence that began with schoolgirl Anna Vera's murder had become ingrained into the social fabric of Jeffery Manor and South Deering, despite the gradual fading of living memory about the initial cause. The enduring conflict has left an indelible generational mark, the specter of fear and danger becoming an inescapable fact that permeates daily existence. Mothers' anxiety over their kids safely walking to school, flinching at the pop of fireworks mistaken for gunshots, glancing over their shoulders, trudging home past dark alleyways. For residents desperate for security, peace, and prosperity, the feud stands as a stark reminder of the ongoing consequences of gang warfare splitting communities. The reality is etched into the consciousness of Southside neighborhoods, striving hopefully for a future untethered from their violent past, still haunted by a conflict igniting before most youths were even born, as loss of life continues periodically between two factions bearing little current connection to slain teenage girl Anna Vera. Her death at rivals' hands has birthed a years-spanning legacy. It remains the original sin continuing to shape an endless narrative of retribution.